I'll go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is David Phillips, and I direct the program on peace building and human rights at Columbia University. And we're very pleased that you are able to join us for tonight's discussion. We've reacted in a very proactive way to the recent events in Nagorno-Karabakh. Through a variety of different media, we've been warning about another Armenian genocide. We've been monitoring developments and are deeply concerned about the trends. Recent statements have exacerbated our concern. Today, there was a statement by Turkey's vice president who said that Turkey will not hesitate, in his words, to intervene militarily if Baku requests the intervention and if conditions warrant. So the idea of Turkish armed forces invading and occupying Nagorno-Karabakh, deeply worrisome. But frankly, it would be consistent with Turkey's recent actions in other conflict areas. There are right now Turkish troops that are in Syria, in Iraq, Libya. Turkish naval forces are confronting Cypriot, Greek, and Israeli navies in the Eastern Mediterranean. Recep Tayyip Erdogan seems to be unbridled in his pursuit of confrontation. It goes beyond a neo-Ottoman ambition. He's seeking violent conflict wherever he can find it as a way of reasserting Turkey's hegemony in the region and beyond. So the notion that Turkish armed forces would be deployed to Nagorno-Karabakh is deeply troubling. So has been the deployment of jihadists from Syria and Libya. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reports that there are several thousand jihadists on the ground in Nagorno-Karabakh. We know from their conduct in northeast Syria that they commit terrible atrocities and crimes against humanity. Their purpose for being in the theater is solely to aggress and to carry out instructions for another Armenian genocide to which the world should be responding. The Minsk group has responded, tried to negotiate ceasefire agreements. A week ago, there was a ceasefire agreement that Mr. Lavrov negotiated. That was soon broken. A few days ago, President Macron also negotiated a ceasefire, and within minutes, it was broken by the Azeri forces. The reason these ceasefire agreements are being undermined is because Turkey doesn't want the fighting to stop. It's pursuing violent conflict. It wants to assert its will militarily to seek a security solution. And the implications, not only in humanitarian terms, but geopolitically, are significant. The US needs to be more engaged diplomatically. We'll hear about that further during the course of the conversation today. We're glad that the foreign minister will have meetings with senior US officials while he's here in Washington. The US needs to lead the Minsk group, and ultimately whatever the Minsk group decides needs to be enshrined at the UN Security Council. So we have a tall task ahead of us and much to discuss. Let me give the floor to Armenia's ambassador to the United States, Barujan Nersessian. Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, David, and good evening, everybody. And I wanted to, first of all, apologize on behalf of my minister who, upon arrival, got some rescheduling in his program and couldn't participate, but he sends his best regards and he wanted me to convey the message on his behalf. Secondly, I wanted to thank Columbia University and you, Mr. Phillips, for convening and organizing this meeting. And I'm happy to share our Armenian perspective with you tonight and to answer the questions of participants. You gave a very appropriate and precise characterization of what's happening right now with my country, with Nagorno-Karabakh, since September 27th. And I'll try to give you a brief overview of the situation, the grave situation on the ground, and and to speak about the mediation efforts, to speak about my minister's current visit to Washington, D.C., which we hope will yield certain results and will create grounds for the progress in the negotiating track. And I'll be happy to answer to all of your questions. So since September 27th, we are facing a major aggression. The people of Nagorno-Karabakh are facing the largest scale aggression since the collapse of the Soviet Union, in comparison to all of the wars that we have seen in the theater of the warfare in the different conflict situations in the entire former Soviet Union space. But the difference of this aggression is that this is not unlike the first Nagorno-Karabakh war or the second war, which was in 2016, 4 days war. This third, if we can call so, war, Nagorno-Karabakh faces not only Azerbaijan's aggression, but faces the combined joint aggression of Azerbaijan, of Turkey, and jihadist terrorists. This has been a premeditated, well-prepared, calculated attack against the people, 140,000 people residing in Nagorno-Karabakh on their ancestral land, today face this immense aggression on the part of these three forces, as I just said. But to understand the context, I would just give you the background, how it started. The president of Azerbaijan, before the war itself, at the UN General Assembly, and on one occasion before that, denounced the activities of OSCE Minsk Group, and he characterized their activities as meaningless. He said the negotiations cannot go on like that, thus opening the way for the military solution. Also, before that, Turkey and Azerbaijan were conducting very, very serious military drills that we have been drawing attention to the international community in preparation of this war. Just in September, Turkey conducted large-scale military, drills on the territory of Azerbaijan and left enormous amount of equipment, particularly F-16s, 6 F-16s, and military personnel on the ground. And Turkey has been in a process prior to the war, sending all kinds of military equipment, but including the most dangerous one, the Turkish unmanned aerial vehicles called Bayraktar, which was used and first tested in Syria, and now we see them in the theater of battlefield of Nagorno-Karabakh. So this has been perpetrated by, first of all, by Turkey. Azerbaijan knowingly did it, but the difference of this war is that Turkey and the reckless dictatorship of Erdogan is the one that pushes this war, and that this is the longest war since the war of 1990s. It is the 25th day that the aggression goes on against the people of Nagorno-Karabakh, but also against the Republic of Armenia, because at certain occasions there was that there were missiles shot on the territory of Armenia in the north, in the region of Sevan Lake, Vartanis, and also in the south, on the town of Kapan. So it's not only the territory of Nagorno-Karabakh which is involved in this war, but also in some occasions, also the territory of the Republic of Armenia. But since the outbreak, Turkey and Azerbaijan conduct this reckless campaign. They have put the entire weight of Azerbaijani army against this 140,000 people. And this will, in whatever way this war will end, this will stay in the history, in the military history, as unprecedented way of a small nation holding its ground very strong, irrespective of these immense forces attacking them, and using the modern technologies, using the cutting edge technologies of of Israeli drones, of Turkish drones, high precision missiles, and so many other munitions that are involved. And Turkish military instructors are directing all of this on the ground, with participation, as I mentioned, which is now of jihadist terrorists. By the way, this is confirmed already by the French president, by Russian intelligence services and foreign ministry publicly, and also multiple occasions it was confirmed by the international mainstream media, the presence on the ground. And Azerbaijan is becoming, knowingly or unknowingly, a terrorist hub right now. In whatever way it will turn, Azerbaijan is going to be responsible for bringing terrorists to South Caucasus together with Turkey and destabilizing, creating grounds for a major destabilization that can affect all the neighboring countries of the region. So since the outbreak of the war, we have seen attacking from all sides, north and south, Nagorno-Karabakh. Right now, Azeri forces, using this immense attacking force, have managed to advance in the south at the border with Iran, where Nagorno-Karabakh defense forces, after the war of 1990s, had taken control of certain territories, and they were using these territories merely as a security buffer zone. In the north, they have not advanced. In the center, they have not advanced. But in the south, they have advanced towards the Republic of Armenia. There are certain certain prognoses that Turkey is pushing Azerbaijan to advance towards the border of the Republic of Armenia, and to try to implement the illusion of the neo-Ottomanism, thus creating a connection between the Turkic-speaking world, implementing the vision, so-called ill-advised vision of the pan-Turkism, trying to cut Armenia from the border with the Islamic Republic of Iran. There are certain prognoses that at this stage, what Azerbaijan and Turkey are pushing is the implementation, is an attempt to implement this ill-advised theory. Also, we have seen throughout this war unprecedented bombardments of civilian settlements in Nagorno-Karabakh. Already on the third, fourth day of this war, Azerbaijani armed forces started to indiscriminately bombard the capital city of Nagorno-Karabakh, Stepanakert, second city, Shushi, and they didn't hesitate to target a Christian cathedral of Shushi and destroy the towers. And then also French journalists were damaged who were nearby. French and Russian journalists were injured as a result of these bombardments, who happened to go there to investigate the condition of the church, the cathedral. And they started to indiscriminately bombard the settlements, civilian settlements, all including with cluster bombs. These are demonstrations of occasions of crimes against humanity. This will be investigated, I'm sure, at some point. When Azerbaijan is trying to put the blame on the Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenia and say that there has been a attack over the second Azerbaijani city, Ganja, which happens to be in Armenian called Ganzak historically, they should remember that those reciprocated missile shootings were merely a response to try to shut down the ongoing indiscriminate shelling of Stepanakert and all other cities and settlements of Nagorno-Karabakh. So when Azerbaijan complains, it should address, first of all, its own acts, because whatever the armed forces of Nagorno-Karabakh undertook was in response as an adequate response towards the original strikes over the territory and the settlements of Nagorno-Karabakh. The co-chairs, I should praise the activities of the OSCE Minsk Group co-chairs, who, as the mediators from the day one, and Mr. Phillips mentioned who are the co-chairs. The co-chairs are the United States, France, and Russian Federation, who have been from the day one engaged on the level of their representatives. And then, of course, we saw that co-chairs on the level of ministers, and Secretary Pompeo produced statement, and then on the level of presidents, they produced another statement. But Azerbaijan and Turkey have completely disrespected these attempts to bring the parties to negotiations and to resume the negotiation and to start to find a peaceful solution to this conflict. Because their attempt, their basic idea is to eliminate the people of Nagorno-Karabakh, to create an ethnic cleansing, and then to put us in front of the situation. One should assure them that there is no way that they can break the resistance of the people of Nagorno-Karabakh, irrespective of the amount of the drones, of the missiles, and whatever. This is not going to be possible to break the will of this, small population who live on their land, and they want to live freely on their ancestral land and live peacefully. We never considered the people of Azerbaijan as our enemies, neither us or Nagorno-Karabakh. The Prime Minister of Armenia, prior to this warfare, by the way, made a statement and said that he assumes that the settlement is supposed to be equally acceptable for the peoples of Armenia, Nagorno-Karabakh, and of the people of Azerbaijan. And he invited the president of Azerbaijan to reciprocate and say that he also accepts the rights of the people of Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh, so that we could create a momentum in understanding. However, the president of Azerbaijan considered Armenian people as his own enemies and the enemies of the people of Azerbaijan, conducted a hate speech and militant rhetoric. And and Azerbaijani government is the one who's responsible for the death of these thousands of people. There are assessments that we lost on both sides thousands of people. This is on the conscience of the Azerbaijani and Turkish leadership. It is the responsibility completely rests with them, because it is on the broad daylight. Everybody knows who initiated this. There is no need even to prove who. There were false attempts on the part of Azerbaijan to put the blame on Armenia, as if Armenia initiated, but it is completely known to the world who is initiating. By the way, if it is so, if Azerbaijan accuses Armenia, why it is that Azerbaijan refused the proposal of the co-chair to establish a verification mechanism for the ceasefire? Prior to the war, there was a proposal by the co-chairs, endorsed by Armenia, endorsed by Nagorno-Karabakh, and blatantly refused by Azerbaijan. They didn't want a mechanism of ceasefire investigation to be in place, so that could hide their future aims to attack and to launch a war. Therefore, this is a grave situation. The international community cannot ignore or turn a blind eye to this conflict. We see a mounting, attention towards the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, towards this situation. But the truth must be told. The truth story of Nagorno-Karabakh people and their plight and their historic fight. This is a historic fight for existence. This is a historic fight for their security. And as I said, this fight, in whatever way it ends, it will remain in the military history of the world as an unprecedented occasion of a small nation fighting in an asymmetric war with forces multiple times, exceeding their capacities, their munitions, their manpower, and everything. This has been a heroic war fought by the people of Nagorno-Karabakh. As regards the core issue of this conflict, it is basically why we are at this stage. And please, Mr. Phillips, interrupt me whenever I exceed my time. So I just want to give a couple of other points, and then we'll go to the next speaker and questions. Yeah. So basically, why we are at this stage. Just to give the little historic and legal background. This land has never been a part of Azerbaijan. This land has been attached to Soviet Azerbaijan as a result of illegal decision of in-person Joseph Stalin and Communist Soviet Party. Never before this land has had any international legal arrangement with Azerbaijan. Therefore, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the people of Nagorno-Karabakh, according to Soviet legislation, opted for their self-determination and through referendum made their choice. So Azerbaijan completely responded in a violent manner in Sumgait, Baku, and in other places, conducting anti-Armenian massacres. And this is how this war started. And it ended up by Nagorno-Karabakh securing beyond these territories a security buffer zone. This was in the negotiations, one of the items to be compromised. But Azerbaijan, after Ilham Aliyev came to power, expressed no interest in talking about mutual compromises. He started to talk about only unilateral compromises, as if Armenians and Nagorno-Karabakh were the ones only to do the compromises, and Azerbaijan was only one to get the gains. Therefore, the negotiations didn't come to yield a reasonable and tangible solution. And that's why, because of Azerbaijan's maximalist expectations and demands and unrealistic demands, we got into these points. Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh have been in favor of solution of a solution that would be mutually acceptable. But the core issue is the issue of the status of Nagorno-Karabakh. And because it has been ignored by Azerbaijan, we ended up in this war. Right now, in the terms of the ways out of this situation, we believe that in the light of this ongoing aggression against the Nagorno-Karabakh people and aimed at their extermination, the international community should start to consider the international recognition of Nagorno-Karabakh, the basic right to self-determination. All of the, if you look to the modern world's map and the UN membership, you will discover that most of the contemporary countries have emerged from their either colonial past or other arrangements through the exercise of the self-determination. And in the light of this current aggression against Nagorno-Karabakh, there is no other way for the people of Nagorno-Karabakh to retreat. They are going to fight, and the Republic of Armenia, as a security guarantor of the Nagorno-Karabakh, stands ready to exercise all necessary measures to protect their existence, to protect and ensure their security. However, the international community has its own part. My minister arrived just an hour ago to Washington, D.C. to have negotiations tomorrow with Secretary Pompeo, with the National Security Advisor and other high-level U.S. officials. And as a co-chair, we are very much hopeful that the United States will exert full pressure over Turkey as a NATO member, first of all, to withdraw completely from this conflict, to withdraw its military, its airplanes, to withdraw its jihadist terrorists from Azerbaijan. First of all, Turkey needs to withdraw. Okay, David, you want to say something? Okay, I'll summarize and maybe we'll go to the question and answer. I understand I spoke too long, so sorry for being too long, and I'll pass the floor to you back. Thank you.
It was a great intervention. Let me just call attention to the two terms that you use, ethnic cleansing and crimes against humanity. Oftentimes in the fog of war, when there's a fast-moving conflict, we're not able to document atrocities that are being committed. And it would be very important, in order to hold the perpetrators accountable in the future, to set up a documentation project, not only of the events on the ground, but also the command and control responsibilities. And if Armenian authorities are looking for an international partner with whom it can work to prepare that documentation, count Columbia University as a colleague. We'd be pleased to discuss that with you.
Absolutely, we will be happy, Mr. Phillips, to share with you all of the information available from the Human Rights Ombudsman of Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenia about the atrocities against the civilian population, even about the beheadings of the military conducted by Azerbaijani military and other crimes against the humanity. We'll be happy to share with you. Thank you.
Good. We want to have a clearinghouse of that information. But right now, we're really focused on how this war ends and what's the role of international mediation. And thank you for sharing your views and information about that. We're very pleased to welcome our next speaker, Van Krikorian, who is the co-chair of the Armenian Assembly of America. I've known Van for 20 years, and I can say without reservation that there's no person who is better informed or more savvy when it comes to US politics than Mr. Krikorian. So Van, if you could direct your remarks to the US response, its role in the Minsk group, and then we'll go back to the ambassador so we can talk a little bit about mediation opportunities.
Sure. And thank you for putting that map up, Maggie. I just wanted to start quickly, and then we can take the map down with one historical note. Actually, I'll tell you where I intend to go. The topic for tonight was U.S. and regional implications. So that's what I intend to focus on a little bit, as well as concrete actions that can be taken. And honestly, hearing the ambassador talk and hearing your comments just now, David, I will say that I am far more pessimistic than either of you, and I'm sure most people. And unfortunately, I think that comes from my experience and the experience of so many friends and family, and also the experience of people who have seen what the Armenians have seen. I do not have much hope that there will eventually be investigations or an accounting of the war criminals in Azerbaijan and Turkey. I have very little hope in that, actually. We learned that lesson the hard way. The Kurds have learned that lesson the hard way. The Assyrians have learned that lesson the hard way. The Greeks have learned that lesson the hard way. Go around the world, small nations, small countries, especially ones without oil, learn that lesson the hard way. I think that what we will end up with at some point is historians looking back and determining who are the good guys and the bad guys. And my goal is, and I think the Armenian American communities and all Americans of goodwill, their goal is to make sure that United States and its officials stand on the side of the good guys, and the people who tried to stop the massacres, stop the killing, stop the genocide. Ambassador Nersessian noted the situation on the ground right now and the similarities with how this started and where it started. President Putin, ironically, drew attention today to how this started. And the brief history is that it started with Armenians exercising their right to petition, a First Amendment right here, a normal human right, to be reunified with Armenia during the Soviet period. The response, again, we were surprised to see it today, but President Putin, first of all, referred back to the Armenian genocide and the overlay of that onto all of this. And then second of all, to the fact that the response to those petitions were pogroms and nasty pogroms. After that, Soviet forces with Azeri forces started Operation Ring to solve the Nagorno-Karabakh issue by eliminating the Armenians. And they did that, if you look at the map that's on the screen, by basically narrowing what was the Nagorno-Karabakh Autonomous Oblast that's identified as Nagorno-Karabakh here to about 50% of what it was, and driving out all the Armenians. We remember at the time of the earthquake that assistance sent from United States and all over the world was taken by Azerbaijan so that it wouldn't get to Armenians. And we remember when Turkey tried to intervene in early 1990s after the breakup of the Soviet Union, and Marshal Shaposhnikov said that it would trigger World War III. Instead, Turkey imposed a blockade. So basically, if you look at where Armenia is, where Nagorno-Karabakh is, this map doesn't show the topography, but it is on a plateau. It is all of the mountainous high grounds, and where there is no Armenian control, it is plains and that sort of natural borders and natural boundaries that are probably going to have to be respected. The current, for those of you that don't know, the current size of Armenia is 1/10 of historic Armenia. If we had more time, we could go into the diplomatic history after World War I, when the United States had the opportunity to accept the mandate for a more sustainable, independent Armenia, turn that down in a move that would have changed the course of the 20th century and the Cold War, prevented a lot more death and actually saved a lot more American lives, but let's leave that for another day. Maggie, you could take the map down now, if you will. So with respect to implications, I want to be a little bit more specific, because really the overlay here is genocide. It is solving the problem by eliminating the Christian Armenians. We spent a very long time, with the Armenian genocide that occurred during World War I, because Turkey and Azerbaijan, which remain as the only two countries that actively deny those facts, are still actively denying them. And imagine having two countries that deny the genocide as your main borders on your east and west. But in this situation, to remove any doubt, we should be very specific and look at the words of President Erdogan starting in May and earlier in this year, when he said that we should finish the job that our grandfathers started, that Armenians are dogs. President Aliyev echoing that twice, saying we will cleanse them like dogs. You can look at the President of Azerbaijan's comments on not only reclaiming territory, but also reclaiming territory right in the middle of Nagorno Karabakh, which had been Armenian inhabited for thousands of years. You can look at the behavior when the world called for a ceasefire, and the only two countries that rejected that were Turkey and Azerbaijan, with each country saying, we'll agree to a ceasefire when we eliminate the Armenians. So if there's a question about intent to commit genocide, I'd suggest that it's pretty clear, the evidence is there, that there's no chance of Turkey and Azerbaijan denying that intent. You cannot agree to a ceasefire, breach it in 5 minutes, and say, we'll only ceasefire when the Armenians are gone. In terms of the implications, generally, I think it's a real test for the United States. We know, victims of atrocities rarely get justice. Rarely. Their children, their grandchildren live with it. Those who die suffer atrocities. And it should also be clear that Genocide Convention not only prohibits genocide and attempts to commit genocide, but in Article 3 prohibits conspiracy, incitement, and complicity in genocide. Here's where we have a lot of areas where the United States, I think, should think about what it's doing. Because the truth is, when these atrocities take place, what the United States and many other countries have done is say, going back to the beginning, if Azerbaijan and Turkish and jihadist soldiers cut off the heads of Armenians and commit atrocities, machine gunning civilians who are completely innocent and then broadcasting as trophy videos, then when the United States calls on both sides to exercise restraint, there is a kind of hypocrisy there that does not reflect well on the United States government. And what I'm afraid is eventually it's not going to reflect well on the American people. And that's something I think we all have to take seriously. I think the other major implication here has to do with terrorism. David and I knew each other before 9/11, and that experience for all Americans, but I think especially New Yorkers, will never leave us. It was absolutely the first time anything like that happened on US shores. For those of us with roots in places where atrocities and genocide took place, we heard the stories, but all of the world saw what that kind of terrorism was like, what those kinds of people are like. And the fact that Turkey and Azerbaijan are openly paying for these Sunni jihadists to come in and fight on their behalf, and we have the videos. They post their own trophy videos standing over the bodies of 18 Armenians saying we killed the Jews and pigs. We have the videos of the massacres of civilians. When those kinds of things happen, and all of the tools the United States has to oppose terrorism, and we give President Macron credit, we have to give President Putin credit, who has a legitimate concern about the presence of these terrorists on his border. Iran has a legitimate concern about the presence of these terrorists on his border. There are all the legal tools to deal with that. Similarly, again, in terms of implications, and I'm going to go quickly because I'm sure we have a lot of questions, but Section 907 of the Freedom Support Act, which was passed in 1992, provides that the United States should not be giving assistance to Azerbaijan so long as it commits aggressive military acts against Nagorno-Karabakh or against Armenia or maintains blockades against both of them. It's clearly doing that. It's openly doing that. When President Aliyev says we can solve this militarily, and it's clear that he's not respecting ceasefires, that law applies. The administration has turned a blind eye to that law. And as I look at the waiver that was signed, it is just frightening to see that words that we know the common meaning of are not applied. The United States, to waive this, has to certify that it's necessary to support U.S. efforts to counter international terrorism. Well, they're promoting international terrorism. They're funding it. They're advancing it. They're spreading it. It's necessary to support the operational readiness of U.S. armed forces to counter international terrorism. Well, they're increasing the risk of U.S. armed forces because of this spread of terrorism and the chance that this war will expand. Iran is understandably reacting with this kind of fighting going on in its border. And finally, it won't undermine or hamper ongoing efforts to negotiate peace. The United States, for its own sake, should be applying Section 907, the law of the land, to stop the military and other assistance to Azerbaijan and send that message. And the other point I'd make here is that the United States has contributed to the military imbalance by sending an extra $100 million or $120 million to Azerbaijan above and beyond what it sent to Armenia in the last 2 years, which was not supposed to happen. They did it surreptitiously. They did it outside the traditional rules of giving equal military aid to both countries. So to claim that all countries should stop or all countries should not be involved, it's really hypocritical. When we consider President Trump's interests and what the New York Times has written about his interests in Azerbaijan and Turkey, that's a whole other issue. But separate and apart from that, because the United States was not being fair. And in the end, that's what we want the United States to be, is fair. If they were fair, they would also be giving direct assistance to Nagorno-Karabakh instead of always trying to stop it. That used to exist, especially with the COVID virus. The COVID virus is spreading now because it's wartime conditions. The United Nations called on peaceful activities only to help stop the spread of the disease, and Azerbaijan flaunted that as well. But now, because of the way it's administered, and I'm going to wrap up, even though I have another 2 hours of talking I could do, David, there are these really simple things. And so the basic point that I would ask, those of us who grew up in the United States, we're proud to be American because it meant we were fair people. We obey the law, we're fair people. We expect the government to be fair. One of the greatest strengths of the United States is having an independent judiciary. Doesn't always get things right, but people think they're being treated fairly. That's how we expect the United States to project itself abroad as well. Not in a transactional format, not in what's good for a particular individual or a particular oil company. And here I would note that the role of the lobbyists, declared and undeclared, for Azerbaijan and Turkey has been absolutely shameful. There are lots of different ways to be corrupt. And we have seen that over the years. We're seeing it again now. exposing that, spreading some sunshine, getting the United States back to, as I say, calling the balls and strikes fairly, would make a world of difference, save lives, and hopefully eliminate the need for us to have this wishful thinking that someday there will be an accounting. Because I don't see a culture for peace in Azerbaijan with this leadership, and I certainly don't see a culture for peace in Turkey with President Erdogan and his followers and regime.
So then let's talk about the way forward. The ambassador mentioned self-determination and the right of Nagorno-Karabakh to determine its political status. The US intervened in Kosovo, claiming that Slobodan Milosevic had lost his right to govern because of the crimes that he had committed. Can the same be said now for Aliyev in Nagorno-Karabakh? And if we are to move forward with the exercise of the right to self-determination, what does that mean? Will Nagorno-Karabakh seek independence? Will it seek to join Armenia? And within what borders? That question comes from Arush Hartunian, who's joined our conference today. So, Mr. Ambassador, maybe you can take the first cut at that.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Phillips. Of course, as I said in my presentation, the self-determination to Nagorno-Karabakh is vital. This is not only self-determination for just its purpose, but also for its security. Self-determination is closely linked to the notion of security. We want that right to be implemented to ensure the security from the existential threat that they are right now facing. You drew a very appropriate parallel with the Slobodan Milosevic's time and with Kosovo. And we see the Kosovo issue is being resolved now through addressing the fundamental issue of self-determination. And equally, the issue of Nagorno-Karabakh can be resolved with addressing of this issue of self-determination and recognizing the independence. Things must be called by their own names, recognizing the independence. The world should come to that stage and have the courage. As I said, half of the modern world has been, gone through the process of self-implementation of this fundamental right, and the Nagorno-Karabakh has the full right. This is enshrined in the UN Charter, this is enshrined in the OSCE Decalogue, and many other documents, and they have this fundamental right. As regards their future choice within what boundaries, of course, the original question, the original question when the movement started after the breakup of the Soviet Union has been about Nagorno-Karabakh autonomous region, 4,500 square kilometers swath of land, sandwiched between Armenia and Azerbaijan. But right now, as a result of the war of 1990s and of Azerbaijan's aggression, the self-defense forces of Nagorno-Karabakh secured a security buffer zone not to allow immediate attack over Nagorno-Karabakh, so-called 7 regions. But this has been a subject to negotiations. There can be all type of, negotiations if the opposite party comes in a good faith to negotiate. But, at this stage, now Azerbaijan with this aggression has driven the conflict at a completely different level. There is no way that Nagorno-Karabakh, in light of this aggression, can ever be subjugated to Azerbaijan. This is conclusion number 1. In whatever solution comes up, there is no way that Nagorno-Karabakh can be subjugated, because we see what is the intention, the genocidal intention of Azerbaijan and Turkey, that they did not give up this ill-advised policy of genocide towards the Armenian people, and now in this case against the people of Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh. As to their choice, of course, it's up to the people of Nagorno-Karabakh. Armenia wouldn't have any strong position if they want to become an independent state or become a part of Armenia. Either solutions would be acceptable as long as it is acceptable for the people of Nagorno-Karabakh. We would be open for any solution in this sense. The fundamental issue is not to be within Azerbaijan's tutelage or yoke, and not to face the existential threat of extermination. Thank you.
Our position is very human rights oriented. Whatever is acceptable to the people who live there is acceptable to us. We're not here to judge whether they want to be independent or unified. Independence, though, just again, history helps us here. Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh petitioned the Soviet Union to reunify with Armenia. Azerbaijan rejected that. Soviet government rejected it. But when Azerbaijan declared its own independence under the Soviet constitution, Nagorno-Karabakh had the right to declare its independence from Azerbaijan, which it did. When we say we're taking a human rights perspective, it is to prevent genocide. And so whatever that takes. I think it's a good opportunity, even though it wasn't directly asked in this question, though, to reiterate what the Prime Minister of Armenia said is, ideally, we would have a solution that is acceptable by the people of Azerbaijan, the people of Nagorno-Karabakh, and the people of Armenia. That is impossible for the foreseeable future. Why? Because there is an authoritarian, corrupt, massively corrupt leader in Azerbaijan with his clan who diverts attention from the theft, the mismanagement, the violations of free press and other human rights by pointing people to Armenians. And ironically, the information that's coming out now about how the overwhelming majority of Azeris being killed in this battle are not from places that constitute his political base. The fact that he's leaving these corpses on the ground, not even giving the ICRC enough time and pause from the fighting to have his own corpses collected because he doesn't want to disclose to his own people how many they are, is telling that there are wild animals there eating his people, and he doesn't care. Who's going to trust him?
So while you two gentlemen were speaking, we've received an avalanche of questions that have come in, 116. Many of them are coming from Azeris. And I want to call your attention to a very important article that Lisa Gulasarian has published over the past couple of days about the media campaign of Turkey and Azerbaijan against Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh. She points out that these social media messages are in fact inspired by the government as a way of defaming the Armenian side. I'm sure that among those 116 questions, there are some that are reasonable and legitimate, but it looks to me like an orchestrated smear campaign. And Lisa's documented that in her article. Let me ask a question about reparations. There's been enormous damage that's been done. In the event that there's a cessation of hostilities, how is Nagorno-Karabakh repaired and who pays for it? Mr. Ambassador?
Thank you, David. That's a very appropriate question too. Of course, the perpetrators of this violence should be held responsible on behalf of the international community, because it's obvious who conducted this, who started the damaging and indiscriminate shelling of the civilian populations. And then this should be a part. There should be a post-conflict rehabilitation. And Azerbaijan, being responsible for this, together with Turkey, should bear the consequences. Overall, there must be, of course, international, very serious attention towards, I mean, first, there needs to be a stop of this violence and return to negotiations, and then to talk about post-conflict rehabilitation. The international community cannot let this unattended. There are all kinds of consequences, negative possible scenarios that might emerge if this region is not paid appropriate attention. Thank you.
And I would say the priority has to be a ceasefire with a buffer zone and the stop to killing of civilians. We know that innocent Azeris have been injured and killed. We know that. In every war, there's collateral damage. I hopefully being a person of good conscience, when allegations were made against Armenians, asked. And if the difference between countries that you want to be a part of and countries you don't want to be a part of is when something goes wrong, the country remedies it. Things go wrong in every country. I would not focus so much. Really, that there's an urgent humanitarian need just to create a ceasefire and a buffer zone. And anyone who opposes that is showing their true colors and being the aggressor and the violator and the genocide committer.
So we've talked about accountability. We've also talked about the humanitarian imperative. Not only the victims of the current conflict, but there are also many people who were displaced from the previous conflict. And they've deliberately been maintained in an unsustainable situation as a way of riling public opinion in Azerbaijan. So that too needs to be addressed as part of a broader, comprehensive solution. Now, Mr. Ambassador, I know that you have an obligation, a dinner obligation, minutes from now. So I'm going to say a word of conclusion, and then we'll adjourn. We all know that the international system works best when the US is deeply involved. And for the Minsk Group to function effectively, for the UN Security Council to function, the US has to be proactive. I've been shocked and appalled at the timid response coming from Washington. And yesterday, there was a revelation as to why. NBC News issued a report that President Trump personally, through the Trump enterprise, has financial position in 119 companies in Turkey. It reported that he's been paid more than $10 million in royalty fees for the use of the Trump name in Turkey. And we also know that Azerbaijani oligarchs have also given millions of dollars to the Trump organization. So for the US to be effective, it needs to put national interests ahead of the president's personal interests. And I would hope in the future that we would see more principled and practical leadership coming from the US, because this situation cries out for a solution, and we will not reach a solution unless the US is more deeply and constructively involved. So we wish the foreign minister a successful visit to Washington. We hope that his meetings with senior US officials can put a light on the path about ways that we move forward and how the US can lead. And I want you to know, Mr. Ambassador, that you're always welcome at Columbia University. When we move beyond COVID and we're not doing a Zoom conference, we'd love to have you on campus. And Van, I want to extend my compliments to you for extremely important interventions. This has been a terrific conversation, very informative, and we look forward to continuing it. So let me say thank you to you, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you to Mr. Krikorian, and also thank you to the audience for joining us. It's a large audience. We've learned a lot. There's more that we need to do. So let us adjourn on that note with resolve to stop the killing and to address the perpetrators of crimes against humanity.
Thank you very, very much. And I'm sorry that we didn't manage to answer all of the questions, but I hope there will be follow-ups and we can, together with Mr. Krikorian, hold another rounds of discussions with you, Mr. Phillips. Thank you very, very much.
All right. Thank you all, and thank you to the audience. Everyone have a good evening, and we'll look forward to speaking again soon.
Thank you all.
Thank you. All the
We're
best.
now adjourned.